This video is for teachers who are looking for an overview or some ideas on how to modify Day 4 of Unit 4 in the U.S. curriculum in Passport to Social Studies. This lesson focuses on the question, what caused the United States to go to war against Spain in 1898, with the objective of students being able to create and support a position concerning the factors that led to the Spanish-American War. Before we begin, there are a few images in this lesson that contain racially insensitive content that students may find upsetting. However, it is representative of the time period and relevant to our study of American history. Therefore, please use discretion and be sure to provide context when using these materials. Fundamentally, this lesson has three parts, with the first two providing space for the students to acquire the content and practice the skills necessary for the third. The first is using a video and three primary source images to assess the causation of the Spanish-American War. Then students will be reintroduced to the language of causation and consequence tool to really hone their causation skills and the words they use to communicate their arguments. And finally, the students will use two documents to construct a short essay question centered on a cause and effect relationship, which will aid them in preparing for the Regents exam. So let's begin by taking a quick look at that first segment, which is the introduction and model component of the lesson. I know the given sequence is for the students to first look at these three images. The first is a political cartoon from a Spanish magazine. The second is another political cartoon, but this one from a US magazine. And finally, a photograph of the wreckage from the USS Maine. And for each, answer the same question. What is a potential cause of the Spanish-American War based on the evidence and in that unique source? Then they are going to watch this video and synthesize the information they learned from all their sources by responding to these two questions. However, you might consider showing the video first, and I say that because depending on the prior knowledge of your students, they might not know enough content to come up with potential causes in each of these three questions that are connected to the images. And by watching the video first, they would be able to connect what they see in both of them, which would likely enable them to come up with some pretty insightful and relevant potential causes. On the other hand, if your students are entering this lesson with adequate knowledge of the time period, sticking to the original sequence and then having them check their responses for these three questions against what they learned in the video is also a sound teaching move. Additionally, depending on the unique needs of your students and also the time constraints of your class, you may need to provide some support for students as they analyze these images, specifically the two political cartoons. Before getting to that though, both cartoons had to be reduced in size to fit on these slides, and it is expected that students will need to click on the links provided to visit the external sites where they will find larger, higher resolution copies that they are able to zoom in on. Also, as this first one is taken from a Spanish magazine, you may need to point your non-Spanish speaking students to the translations that appear below it in that external site. A support your students may need is modeling of how to analyze either of the political cartoons. Depending on their familiarity and expertise with them, you may opt to do a full modeling via a think aloud as you analyze one or even both. If you anticipate your students really needing support with this, you can even modify this slide to look like this and share your screen as you walk through your own analysis of the cartoon using the See, Connect, and Infer protocol and allow students to see the text as you fill out each of these three boxes. Then you can have the students try the second one on their own. If they require less support, but you still want to do some sort of whole class check for understanding before moving forward, a time-efficient way could be to set up a note-sharing site or a discussion board if you're using an online teaching platform where students can share their potential causes and react to those of their peers. If you want to create a space for student-to-student interaction, arrange them into pairs in breakout rooms and instruct them to share their potential causes for each of the three images, but also try to reach consensus on what they believe the purpose or the message of the artist is. Obviously, most of these are really only going to benefit students who you are working with synchronously. So as for any asynchronous students that you believe would need support in breaking down these primary sources, really consider adding the See, Connect, and Infer slide to each of the images before they try to tackle this question about potential causes. Hopefully doing so will guide their analysis, which is going to benefit them later on in this lesson. After completing this segment, the students are now ready to combine their content knowledge with the prior work that they've done regarding causation, which is kind of like an intermediary step that's going to help them with the SEQ at the end of this lesson. To assist them with this, they will be using the language of causation and consequence tool, and it does appear later in the slide deck. And I never know if it's more convenient for the students to flip back and forth between their slides or tabs in their internet browser as they're referring back and forth between this tool and what they're actually writing. If your students prefer the latter, or you at least want to give them the option, you can also include a link to the PDF version like I did here. I got this version from the Unit 2 guide that's posted on WeTeach, and all I did was I copied and pasted that page that has this tool on it into its own PDF document, which I then uploaded to Google, and I was able to link to this text here by double-clicking and clicking link. So then the students just need to click on it and the tool will open for them in a new tab. Since they will be using this tool with two sources, the first can serve as a model, and the second one they can do independently. In fact, that first one is actually the same photograph of the wreckage of the Maine from earlier in their lesson, which really does reinforce the content. And again, if you feel as though your synchronous students would benefit from a think aloud of the process instead of just seeing the final model that you see here, that is something you can definitely do. And if you do opt for this route, consider also having the language of causation tool open like I'm doing here, and share your screen with the students as you give them visual support of what you are verbally describing. For your students who may need less support, or ones that you want to practice their independence, instruct them not to use these sentence starters like we do in the model, but maybe use some words or phrases from one of the other three sections. Before having the students begin their independent work in this section, take time to review the directions with them that appear on this slide. Make sure they understand they will be reading this secondary source, and if they click the link to go to the external site, it does appear at the bottom of the page, but it also does appear in the following slides, and they are going to use it to identify additional causes of the Spanish-American War, which then they are going to categorize as either being immediate, short-term, or long-term causes. If you've been following the Passport to Self-Studies curriculum, this is a skill that they have done a lot in earlier units, but they might be a little rusty, so it might be good to verbally review with the students the definitions or even provide some examples of what short-term, immediate, and long-term causes are. Also, and I'm going to highlight it right here, the students should apply what they garnered from this source and the language of causation tool to record 4 statements about why the United States fought in the Spanish-American War. After the students are finished with this, and you'd like to provide the opportunity for student-to-student discussion, one option would be for you to have the students share the one that they selected as their best with a partner in a breakout room. Then instruct each partner to start the discussion by determining whether it is an immediate, short, or long-term cause. After the students organize the causes they identified, use the language of causation and consequence tool to write their 4 statements, and they selected their best. They now move on to the culminating activity, which is to use 2 documents to construct a short essay question which emulates part 2 of the Regents. The first source is a new one from President McKinley, and the second is actually that cartoon again from the Spanish magazine. As you preview this with your students, make them aware how their previous work fits into their SEQ writing. If you have students that may need some support getting started, you can even enter where they should be pulling their ideas from, like you see here.